The bleach never really covers the smell of sweat in a gym like this. It just sits on top of it, sharp, chemical, and cruel to the back of the throat. Jonah Reyes knew that smell better than anyone in the building, because he was the one who made it happen every single night. Jonah was 38, though his knees told a different story. He worked the overnight cleaning shift at Meridian Combat Club, a glass-walled martial arts academy in Portland, where tech executives paid $400 a month to feel dangerous for an hour. Jonah wasn't there to feel anything. He was there because it was the only job that would take a man with a bad leg and a resume full of gaps. It was 8 o'clock on a Tuesday, and Jonah was pushing a mop across the tatami mats when the Ashford twins walked in. Nash and Kane Ashford were 32, identical down to the slick-back hair and the restless energy of men who had never once been told no. They'd built a logistics software company worth more than the neighborhood Jonah lived in, and tonight they were drilling kicks against a heavy bag in matching black GIs. Arguing about hip rotation like it mattered. Jonah watched them the way you'd watch a television with the sound off. They had speed, they had expensive technique. What they didn't have was weight, the kind of weight that only comes from throwing a punch that has to land, because if it doesn't, something worse happens to you. His mind wasn't really on the twins, though. It was 3 miles away on a kitchen table next to a salt shaker and an envelope stamped final notice. He needed $800 by Friday. He had $42 in his account and a 7-year-old daughter asleep on a mattress she'd long since outgrown, wearing a winter coat 2 sizes too small. Hey. Maintenance. Jonah straightened slowly, his knee popping. Nash was standing at the edge of the mat, cologne drifting over like a wall. Our sparring partner canceled. Food poisoning, Kane said, wiping his face with a towel. We've got a tournament Saturday. We need a body to drill distance on, someone who isn't a bag. I clean the floors, Jonah said flatly. I don't bleed on them, Nash sighed, the sigh of a man who solved every inconvenience with cash. He pulled a money clip from his bag and peeled off several bills. 300. 30 minutes light contact. You stand there, you keep your guard up, we work our angles, we won't break you. Jonah looked at the money. 300 wouldn't cover the rent, but it would cover groceries and a coat that actually fit his daughter. He felt the old, familiar shame crawl up his spine, the same one he felt at the VA office, the same one he felt asking his landlord for one more week. Make it 500, he heard himself say. The twins traded a look. Kane grinned. 500, done. Grab a GI from the loaner bin. In the locker room, Jonah pulled off his shirt. The mirror showed him what the gym members never saw, a shoulder that sat too low, a jagged scar across his ribs, and faded ink on his forearm. The remnant of a ranger tattoo half erased by shrapnel scarring from a firefight outside Kandahar. He pulled on the stiff canvas jacket and told himself the only thing that mattered, 30 minutes, take the hits, take the money, go home to Mia. He didn't know yet that 30 minutes was about to turn into something neither twin would ever forget. The mats were cold under his bare feet. Nash tossed him red headgear and padded gloves. Point fighting, we pull the power, you block, and if you see an opening you can counter light, just keep us honest. Jonah strapped on the gear. It smelled sour like old pennies. He didn't drop into a stance, just stood loose, hands at chest height. Kane went first. He closed the distance with a skipping side kick, and Jonah's eyes tracked it perfectly, but his knee locked half a second too late. Smack, the kick caught him square in the ribs. The air left his lungs in a hiss. He stumbled, and Kane followed with 2 sharp jabs to the headgear. Too slow, old man, Kane said, bouncing back with a grin. Jonah tasted copper in the back of his throat. He nodded and tapped his gloves. Take the money, just take the money. Kane came again, a high roundhouse aimed at his neck. Jonah caught it on his forearm, but the force sent him sprawling onto his back. Nash laughed from the sidelines. Come on, maintenance, make him work for it. Jonah lay there for a second under the buzzing fluorescent lights, ribs burning, and looked up at Kane's smug, satisfied face, the face of a man who thought violence was a game with soft landings and referees. Something cold and quiet snapped behind Jonah's eyes. It wasn't rage. Rage was loud. This was stillness, the same stillness that had once kept him alive in alleys where there were no points, only waking up the next day or not. He stood up. He didn't brush off his pants. He reached up, tore off the headgear, and dropped it on the mat. Rules are rules, Kane said, frowning. Put the gear back on. Your distance management is garbage, Jonah said quietly. He stepped forward, flat-footed, low center of gravity, nothing like a karate stance. Come on, make me work for it. Kane's smile disappeared. Your funeral, he blitzed forward with a reverse punch into a spinning backfist, textbook, fast, expensive. Jonah didn't dodge. He stepped asterisk into asterisk it, slipping his head an inch to the side so the glove barely grazed his ear, and in the same motion his hand closed around Kane's collar like a vice. Kane gasped, trying to pull away. He couldn't. Jonah drove his forearm under Kane's chin, forcing his head back, and swept his boot behind Kane's ankle in one ugly, violent motion. Kane's feet left the floor. He hit the mat with a slam that echoed off the mirrored walls. Jonah dropped his knee onto Kane's chest, pinning him, and pulled back a bare fist that stopped 2 inches from Kane's nose. The gym went dead silent. The only sound was the hum of the lights and Kane's panicked, wheezing breath. In the real world, Jonah murmured, his fist trembling with restraint, when you leave your feet, you die. Now pay me, but the night wasn't over because Nash wasn't going to just stand there and watch. Nash lunged without warning, a wild overhand right aimed at the back of Jonah's skull. Jonah caught the movement in his periphery and threw his weight sideways, rolling off Kane's chest. The fist clipped his shoulder instead, sending a hot spike down his collarbone. He hit the mat hard. Nash was already coming again, abandoning every polished technique he owned, throwing a front kick at Jonah's ribs. Jonah caught the ankle, twisted his torso, and drove his shoulder into Nash's supporting knee. Nash crashed to the floor. Jonah scrambled on top of him and pressed a forearm across his throat. You want to play, he wheezed. You want to feel what it's like. Nash clawed uselessly at his arm. Across the mat, Kane sat up, coughing, dragging ragged breaths into bruised lungs, watching his brother pinned by a man he'd called maintenance 20 minutes earlier. The mirrored walls of the most expensive gym in Portland were reflecting something that looked like a back alley mugging. Jonah held it 3 more seconds, long enough to feel the frantic, bird-like flutter of Nash's pulse, and then let go. He rolled off and collapsed onto his back, staring at the ceiling, his chest heaving. And that's when the fear hit him harder than any kick had. I just assaulted my employers, asterisk, he thought, the adrenaline draining out and leaving something cold behind. I'm going to lose the job. I'm going to jail. Mia, he forced himself upright, joints popping, and looked at the twins, both sitting on the mat, staring at him like he'd crawled out of a grave. Jonah said nothing. He untied the loaner belt, shrugged off the jacket, and walked toward Nash's leather duffel bag. The 500, he said, flat, no bravado, just a man asking for his wages. Nash stared, rubbing his throat. You almost broke my brother's neck, and you want the asterisk money. You paid for a live target, Jonah said. You paid for a lesson. I gave you one. Kane got to his feet slowly, looking less angry than genuinely shaken. Pay him, Nash, he rasped. Nash's hands trembled slightly as he peeled off 5 crisp $100 bills and held them out. Jonah took them, folded them twice, and shoved them into his cargo pants without a word of thanks. He turned back toward his mop bucket. Wait, it was Kane, who asterisk our asterisk you, that wasn't karate. You didn't even look at my hands when I threw that combination. Jonah's grip tightened on the mop handle. The truth, 3 years in physical therapy learning to walk again without a cane. The lie, just a guy who watched a lot of YouTube. He chose neither. I'm the guy who cleans your floors, he said, not turning around. You look at hands because you're playing tag, waiting for the strike so you can block it and score a point. I look at shoulders and hips. I don't care about the strike. I care about destroying the foundation it comes from. He pushed the mop forward. We'll double your salary, Nash blurted, stepping closer. Quit maintenance. Come work for us, executive protection, personal training, whatever you want to call it. I don't care about your tournament, Jonah said. And the exhaustion in his voice was heavier than the bucket at his feet. Everyone has a price, Kane said. We just gave you $500 for 3 minutes. You paid for the grocery money, Jonah said softly. You can't buy the desperation behind it. When you fight, you're calculating points. When I fight, I'm calculating how many shifts I'll miss if my ribs crack and the medical bills I can't cover. I fight like I have no safety net because I don't. You don't learn that on a padded mat. You only learn it when the world takes everything away from you. He turned back to the bucket and plunged the mop into the gray water. Keep your money in your wallet, kids. You don't want this lesson, it costs too much. He thought that was the end of it. He had no idea his phone was about to prove him wrong. The bus ride home took 45 minutes. Jonah sat in the back, the plastic seat digging into his bruised ribs, rain smearing the city lights into blurry streaks against the window. The adrenaline was long gone, replaced by a cold, trembling exhaustion. His knee throbbed against his pants leg. His shoulder felt like someone had driven a hot iron through it. He reached into his pocket and felt the folded bills, $500. He closed his eyes and breathed in the smell of wet wool and stale coffee, not eucalyptus and cologne, but the smell of survival. His apartment building smelled like boiled cabbage. The elevator had been broken for a month, so he took the stairs, dragging his bad leg, knuckles white on the railing. Inside, the apartment was quiet and warm. He set his keys in the bowl by the door and eased off his boots. He looked in on his daughter. Mia was 7, curled under a faded patchwork quilt, breathing slow and even, completely untroubled by the world. Her sneakers sat by the bed, soles worn smooth, seams fraying. Jonah leaned against the doorframe, and the hard armor he'd worn all night, the same armor that had just choked out a billionaire twice his size, cracked and fell away. He didn't feel dangerous. He just felt tired down to the bone. In the kitchen, the eviction notice was still sitting by the salt shaker. He smoothed the $500 out on top of it. It wasn't a fix. It was a bandage on a bullet wound, but it bought him Friday. It bought groceries. It bought time. He ran cold water over his bruised knuckles and stared out at the rain-slicked alley below. Then his phone buzzed. He almost didn't look. When he did, the message was from an unknown number. "This is Kane Ashford. Got your number from the facility manager's emergency contact file." "Hope that's okay." A second message followed before he could decide whether to respond. "You were right. We don't know anything. We canceled the tournament. We don't want to learn how to score points anymore. We want to learn how to survive. Name your hourly rate. We'll meet you wherever you say." Jonah stood in the quiet kitchen, the hum of the old refrigerator the only sound in the room. He looked at the screen, then at the money sitting on the table, then down the hallway toward his daughter's door. They still didn't get it. They still thought they could write a check and buy his grit, his history, his pain, like tourists paying a local for an authentic taste of poverty and war. His thumbs hovered over the cracked screen for a long moment. Then he typed slowly, his joints stiff from the night. "Tomorrow, 5 a.m. Harborview Pier. Bring running shoes. Leave the silk ties and the egos at home. If you puke, you're fired." He hit send and set the phone face down on the counter. He didn't know if they'd actually show up. Honestly, he wasn't sure he cared either way. If they came, he'd break them down, not with fists this time, but with the cold, unglamorous reality of endurance. And if they didn't, he still had the rent money. He turned off the kitchen light and limped toward his bed. Tomorrow was going to hurt. But tonight, for the first time in weeks, the ghosts were quiet and the rent was paid. So, what would you have done in Jonah's position? Would you have taken that first $300 or walked away and kept your dignity intact? Let me know in the comments and tell me where in the world you're watching this from. If this story hit you the way it hit me, do me a favor and hit that like button, subscribe for more stories like this one every week, and share it with someone who could use a reminder of what real strength actually looks like.